The email hit my phone at 6:12 a.m. while I was standing barefoot on cold tile, warming a bottle I didn't realize had never really been mine to make. Probability of paternity, 0%. That number didn't feel real at first. It looked like a typo. Like a formatting glitch. Like the kind of mistake you call customer support about. But I work in compliance at a credit union. My entire job is built on one brutal truth: paper doesn't glitch. People do. I stared at the screen until my eyes started to sting. Then I turned the phone face down on the counter like it had embarrassed me. From the living room, I heard our son, Caleb, making those soft toddler noises, the half-cry, half-babble that meant he'd woken up and didn't know whether to be mad about it. I picked up the bottle anyway. Not because I'm a saint. Not because I didn't feel something inside me cracking into sharp pieces. Because routine is what kept me from doing something stupid. And because, for the last 2 years, I'd been the one waking up first. My name's Nate. I'm 36, born and raised outside Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm not the loud, chest-thumping type. I don't punch walls. I don't scream. I've never even been in a real fight unless you count trying to assemble a crib with an Allen wrench at 1 a.m. My wife, Megan, is 34. Marketing. Sharp. Social. The kind of person who can walk into a room and leave with 5 new friends and a new job offer. We'd been married 7 years. From the outside, we were that annoying couple you'd hate a little: decent house in a decent neighborhood, 2 cars, weekend brunch, joint Christmas card with matching flannel pajamas. The whole thing. The trouble didn't start with lipstick on a collar or a hotel key falling out of a purse. It started the way a lot of marriages break, quietly. Megan started staying late more. Not just occasionally, consistently. Her phone became a living thing that never left her palm. Face down on tables. Password changes. Sudden privacy she'd never needed before. When I asked, she'd give me answers that sounded reasonable but felt rehearsed. Client fires. New campaign. Team dinners. Networking. I wanted to be supportive. I was supportive. I took Caleb to daycare. I handled groceries. I did bath time. I booked pediatric appointments. I learned how to cut grapes into quarters like they were explosive devices. But the more I carried, the more she drifted. And then there were the little details that made my brain itch. She stopped wearing her wedding ring, because it was irritating her skin, but it only irritated her skin on weeknights. She started buying new underwear. Not, I needed basics underwear. The kind of underwear you buy when you expect someone else to see it. She started working out, which I didn't mind, good for her, but she suddenly cared a lot about how she looked leaving the house and not at all about how she looked coming home. And she started calling me by my name more than, babe. Which sounds like nothing, but in a marriage, tone changes are weather. You notice them. The biggest sign was Megan's affection turning transactional. Like she was paying a bill. A kiss on the cheek when she needed something. A quick hand squeeze when her mom was around. Sex that felt like a checkbox to keep the peace, spaced out just enough to say, see? Everything's fine. I told myself I was imagining it. Because the alternative was too big. The day everything started was not romantic or cinematic. It was a Tuesday in February, rainy and gray, the kind of day that makes the whole world look like wet cardboard. Caleb had a fever and a rash that spread like spilled ink across his stomach. Megan was already gone for work, so I took him to urgent care. The nurse was young, sweet, and efficient. She asked questions, typed, nodded, and then said, "Okay, Dad, what's your blood type?" I told her. "Oh, positive." She asked Megan's. I said I thought she was a negative. We'd talked about it once because she made a big deal out of donating blood. The nurse paused. Not dramatically. Just a fractional pause like a speed bump. Then she smiled, still polite. And Caleb's blood type is B negative. I didn't understand the significance right away. I'm not a doctor. But I know enough about systems to recognize when a process is trying to avoid saying something out loud. She said, gently, sometimes records are wrong. We'll confirm at the lab. And then she walked out. I sat there holding my kid while he leaned his sweaty forehead against my shoulder. I didn't jump straight to, my wife cheated. I went to, medical record error. But on the drive home, my brain started doing what it does when something doesn't line up, it started sorting possibilities. That night, after Caleb was asleep, I Googled. And then I Googled again, because I didn't like what I read. And then I went down a rabbit hole of blood type inheritance charts that made my stomach feel like it was falling through the floor. It wasn't definitive. Not a smoking gun. But it was enough to open a door I didn't want open. When Megan got home, she had that bright, practiced exhaustion. She asked about Caleb without really asking. Like she was saying the words because she knew she should. He's got a rash and a fever, I said. Urgent care thinks it's viral. They ran labs. Okay, she said, already walking toward the bedroom. I'm gonna shower. I watched her leave. And I realized I didn't want to argue. I wanted the truth. So I did what I do for a living. I documented. Over the next week, I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse. I didn't snoop like a cartoon husband with a magnifying glass. I quietly gathered the kind of information that holds up in a room with lawyers. I pulled phone logs from our shared account. I checked bank statements for patterns, charges that didn't match her story. I took photos of receipts left in the car. I logged dates and times she claimed she was at work. And then I ordered an at-home paternity test. Not because I wanted to blow up my marriage. Because I needed a yes or no. Something clean. Something that didn't depend on me interpreting looks and vibes and perfume and tone. The kit arrived in a plain envelope. I hid it in my work bag. 2 days later, Megan was on a team dinner. I did the swabs while Caleb was watching cartoons, completely unaware he was the center of my life collapsing in slow motion. I swabbed his cheek gently. I swabbed mine. I sealed it. I mailed it. And I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself the blood type thing was a fluke. I told myself I'd feel stupid in a week. I've never wanted to be stupid more in my life. The email came 10 days later. 0%. Not low probability. Not inconclusive. Not we recommend retesting. 0. I didn't move for a long time after reading it. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. What I felt first wasn't even anger. It was this hollow, stunned quiet, like someone had turned the sound off in my head. Then I did something I'm not proud of, I checked Caleb's baby book. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted a different kind of proof. Maybe I wanted to see if my reality could be rearranged into something that hurt less. But the baby book didn't change anything. It just had pictures of me holding him in the hospital, smiling like my heart was safe. That night, Megan came home at 9:40 p.m. smelling like wine and someone else's cologne layered under her perfume. Not strong. Just there. She dropped her keys in the bowl. She leaned in to kiss me, and I stepped back without thinking. Her face tightened. What's wrong? I looked at her for a second. Really looked. And the wild thing was she didn't look like a villain. She looked like my wife. Like the woman I'd built my life with. Which made it worse. I got some lab results today, I said. Her eyes flicked, just a flash, like her nervous system already knew what word was coming. What kind of results? She asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I didn't call her names. I said, Caleb isn't mine. She stared like I'd spoken a language she didn't know. Then she laughed once. A short, sharp laugh that was pure defense. That's not funny. It's not a joke, I said. I did a paternity test. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Why would you, she started, but she couldn't land anywhere. Her hands fluttered at her sides like she didn't know what to do with them. I waited. Because I wanted to see what she chose. And what she chose was the oldest move in the book. She went straight to offense. How could you do that behind my back, she snapped. That is such a violation, Nate. I nodded once, slowly. Okay. That seemed to throw her off. Most people expect a fight. They expect a yell back. I didn't give her anything. I said, explain it. Her eyes shined like she could cry if she wanted to. She's always been good at that, summoning emotion like it's a resource. It has to be wrong, she said quickly. Those tests can be wrong. 0% is not wrong, I said. It's not a maybe. She swallowed. You don't understand genetics, I understand enough, I said. And even if I didn't, I can read a report. She started pacing. You're seriously accusing me of cheating? I'm not accusing, I said. I'm stating a fact. That doesn't mean, she began, then stopped, because she realized where that sentence led. There are only so many doors in a hallway. She tried another one. Maybe the hospital mixed something up. I looked at her. With my swab and his swab. In my house. Silence. Then she went smaller, quieter. It was complicated, she said. That was the first honest thing she'd said all night. I nodded again. Who? She looked down at the floor. Nate, who? I repeated. And she whispered a name like it burned. Dylan. I felt something in my chest tighten, not because I recognized it right away, but because I could tell by the way she said it that she'd said it before. With affection. With familiarity. Dylan who? She hesitated. Dylan Mercer. I knew him. Of course I knew him. He worked at her company. Not directly with her. But he was around. I'd met him at a holiday party. He was tall, confident, the kind of guy who talks to you like he's already decided where you fit on his ladder. I remembered shaking his hand. I remembered Megan laughing at something he said. I remembered thinking, he's a little much, and then forgetting about him because I trusted my wife. Megan sank onto the couch like her bones had turned to water. It was one time, she said, and her voice cracked. It was before I even knew I was pregnant. I didn't know, Nate. I didn't know. I didn't react. Because, one time, is a story people tell when the truth has too many chapters. I asked, when? She looked up at me like a trapped animal. And then she gave me a date. A date that made my stomach flip because it landed right on one of her team retreats that I'd encouraged her to go to. I sat down across from her, hands folded, like I was interviewing someone at work. Were you ever going to tell me? She started crying then. Real tears. Loud enough to sound convincing. I was scared, she said. I thought if I told you, you'd leave. I stared at her, and I realized she didn't say, I didn't want to hurt you. She said, I didn't want you to leave. That's not love. That's control. I said, you let me sign the birth certificate. She shook her head frantically. I didn't, I thought, I hoped, you knew there was a chance. She didn't answer. Which was an answer. After Megan finally went upstairs, still crying, still talking, still trying to pull me into the chaos, I stayed on the couch until the house went quiet. Then I went to the kitchen and opened a cabinet I hadn't opened in years. I don't drink much. Maybe a beer watching football. Maybe a bourbon at Thanksgiving. That night, I poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass and stared at it like it was a math problem. I didn't even want the alcohol. I wanted something to blunt the reality. Because the truth is, the pain wasn't just, my wife cheated. It wasn't even, my kid isn't biologically mine. It was the entire timeline of my life rewinding and turning poisonous. Every late-night feeding. Every "daddy" yelled when I walked through the door. Every photo of me holding Caleb at the hospital. Every time I told my parents they were grandparents. Every time Megan looked me in the eye and let me believe. I felt anger, but it was cold anger. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that calculates. I felt grief in weird flashes, like when I saw Caleb's little shoes by the door and my brain screamed, "That's not your kid." And then another part of me screamed back, "He is. He doesn't know any different." I didn't sleep. My body was awake in a way it had never been awake before, like it was preparing to survive an attack. At 3:17 a.m., I opened my laptop and started making a list. Not a revenge fantasy list. A checklist. Confirm test with legal chain of custody lab. Consult family law attorney. Secure finances. Preserve evidence. Establish a separate residence plan. Protect myself from false allegations. Because once you realize someone can lie to your face for years, you also realize they can lie about anything else too. And I was not going to be the guy who gets blindsided twice. The next morning, Megan acted like she'd been hit by a truck. Puffy eyes. Soft voice. Cautious movements. I didn't punish her with cruelty. I didn't call her names. I treated her like a risk. Which she was. "Can we talk?" she asked while Caleb ate Cheerios in his high chair. I said, "Not right now." Her eyes filled again. "Nate, please," I kept my voice level. "Not in front of him." She nodded, wiping at her face like she could wipe away consequences. I took Caleb to daycare. I smiled at the teacher. I signed him in. I buckled him into his little chair and kissed his forehead and told him I'd see him later. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and stared straight ahead until my hands stopped shaking. At 9 a.m., I was in a law office in downtown Raleigh. A woman named Marianne Holt, family law, 15 years, calm eyes, looked at me over her glasses and said, "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." So I did. I brought the paternity results, screenshots of phone logs, bank statements, a timeline I'd typed at 4 a.m. She didn't flinch. She didn't dramatize it. She just nodded and asked the right questions. Then she said words that made my throat go tight. "In North Carolina, you can petition to disestablish paternity under certain circumstances, but timing matters. Also, the court may prioritize the child's stability. You need to decide what outcome you want." I swallowed. "I want truth in writing." She nodded. Then we proceed carefully. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account at a different institution. I rerouted my direct deposit. Not because I wanted to financially abuse my wife, because I've seen how quickly a spouse can empty a joint account and call it fair. I froze our joint credit cards. I changed my passwords. And I installed a doorbell camera. Again, no theatrics. Just prevention. That night, after Caleb was asleep, Megan sat on the couch like she was waiting for a verdict. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I swear to God, Nate, I didn't plan this." I sat in the armchair across from her. "I met with a lawyer today," I said. Her face drained. "You, already?" "Yes. You're really doing this?" "I'm responding to what you did," I said. She leaned forward, desperate. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can." I watched her. The shaking hands. The wet eyes. The tremble in her voice. And I felt a small, brutal clarity. She wasn't sad that she betrayed me. She was sad that the system of lies she built was finally getting audited. I said, "Who else knows?" She blinked. "What? Your mom? Your friends? Dylan's friends? Anyone?" She hesitated too long. I nodded once. "Okay." She burst into fresh tears. "It was just Dylan. It was just," I held up a hand, not aggressively, just a stop sign. "I'm not doing this back and forth," I said. "From now on, we communicate in writing." Her mouth fell open. "Nate, you can't just." "I can," I said. "And I am." She tried anger again, like yesterday. "You're being so cold." I looked at her and said the truest thing I'd said in weeks: if I wasn't cold, I'd burn this whole house down with my life still inside it. I stood up. "I'm sleeping in the guest room." She followed me down the hall. "What about Caleb?" I paused at the door. And this is where my voice finally changed, not louder, just heavier. "Caleb didn't do anything wrong," I said. "But you did." Then I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I just shut it. A clean click. A boundary. I wish I could tell you that night was the end. It wasn't. It was the beginning of the part where your life becomes paperwork. The part where love turns into documents. The part where you realize betrayal isn't always a dramatic event. Sometimes it's a woman making breakfast for her husband while keeping a secret that could destroy him. Here's what I learned in the first 48 hours, if you feel crazy, document. Feelings can be manipulated. Facts can't. Don't confront without a plan. Not because you want to win, but because you need to protect yourself. Someone who can lie that big can lie bigger. Assume nothing is off limits. Stay calm for you, not for them. Rage feels powerful, but it's expensive in court and ruinous in real life. And the hardest lesson: you can love a child with your whole chest and still need the truth about where you stand. Because the truth is the only thing you can build on after someone sets fire to your reality. That night, lying in the guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house settle. Megan cried behind the closed bedroom door, and for a second, just a second, I felt the urge to go comfort her, out of habit, out of history. Then I remembered the email. 0%. And I rolled over and opened my notes app and added the next item to the list: serve papers. Secure custody terms. Correct the record. No screaming. Only law and facts. The first thing my attorney told me, after she'd read the paternity report and watched my face do that numb, dissociated thing, was this: don't do anything that feels good in the moment. Do what holds up later. I didn't fully understand how hard that would be until I went home and saw Megan sitting on the floor of Caleb's room, folding tiny pajamas like the act of folding them could fold time backward. She looked up at me with swollen eyes and said, "Please, don't take my family away." I didn't correct her. I didn't say, "You already did." I just stood in the doorway and watched my life in pieces on the carpet. People think staying calm means you're not hurting. Staying calm just means you're bleeding internally. I went to work the next day and smiled at coworkers and answered emails like my brain wasn't playing the same 3 images on a loop: Megan's face when I said, paternity test. Caleb calling me, Dada, with his arms up. That number, 0%. My body kept reacting even when my mind tried to stay professional. My hands would shake when I held a coffee mug. I'd get sudden nausea in the middle of routine meetings. One time, in the break room, I saw a guy bounce his baby on his shoulder while talking on speakerphone, and I had to step into the stairwell because the jealousy hit me like a punch. Not because I wanted his life. Because I wanted my life back. And I couldn't. At night, I'd lie in the guest room and listen for Caleb's footsteps. Sometimes he'd toddle down the hall and push open my door, eyes half closed, and crawl up beside me like he'd done since he could walk. That was the cruelest part. He didn't know. He didn't understand biology or betrayal or legal definitions. He only understood that I was the person who gave him water when he cried and made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs and rubbed his back when his stomach hurt. So when people ask later, did you hate the kid? No. I hated what was done to all of us. There's a difference. The anger I felt toward Megan wasn't explosive. It was clarifying. Like cold air filling my lungs. I'd look at her and see someone who let me build a life on fraud. And every time she tried to talk, to cry, to touch my arm like she still had access to me, something in me hardened. Not into cruelty. Into procedure. On Thursday, I emailed Megan. Not a text. Not a conversation. An email, because emails become exhibits. Megan, for now, any communication should be about Caleb's care and logistics only. Please do not discuss our relationship in front of him. We will be using written communication going forward. Nate, she responded within minutes. Nate, please don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake. We can fix this. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my attorney. That became the pattern. She wrote emotion, I responded with structure. Marianne set up a legally defensible paternity test through an accredited lab, appointments, IDs, witness signatures. No mail-in kit arguments. No tampering excuses. The day of the test, I sat in a plastic chair in a sterile office while a tech scanned my driver's license and made me sign a form that basically said, yes, this is my body, I understand the consequences. Caleb sat on my knee kicking his feet, happily chewing a fruit snack. The tech smiled at him and said, big day, buddy. Caleb grinned. Snack. I nodded and kept my face blank. Inside, I felt like I was being gutted with a spoon. When the results came back, they were exactly the same. Excluded. No ambiguity. No miracle. No relief. Marianne called me and said, okay. Next step. And I realized then that, next step, was my life now. A staircase leading away from everything I thought I had. I never wanted to be the guy collecting screenshots. But I'd watched a buddy from college get destroyed in a divorce because he assumed we'll be civil. His wife emptied accounts, accused him of things he never did, and by the time he realized it wasn't going to be amicable, he was already behind. So I did what I'm trained to do. I built a file. Phone logs with Dylan's number recurring at odd hours. Bank statements with charges that matched team dinners that were clearly two-person dinners. Photos of hotel receipts left in the car door pocket. A timeline of Megan's work trips that lined up with Dylan's tagged social posts. I didn't post it online. I didn't threaten her with it. I didn't go scorched earth on social media. I just put it in a folder and gave it to Marianne. She glanced at it and said, good. Quietly good. Then she added something that stayed with me, people who commit one major deception tend to panic when consequences arrive. Panic makes them dangerous. That's why coldness is a survival skill. Megan assumed I'd leave the house. She kept saying things like, maybe you should go stay with your parents for a while, in that careful voice people use when they're trying to steer you without appearing to. Marianne's advice was simple, don't abandon the home without a plan. So I didn't. I stayed in the guest room. I documented my contributions. I took photos of the house condition. I made sure every utility bill I paid came from traceable accounts. I limited conversations to logistics. Megan hated that. Because she couldn't make me the villain. One night, she tried. She stood in the hallway outside the guest room and said, you're acting like a robot. Do you feel anything at all? I looked at her and said, evenly, I feel enough that if I don't act like a robot, I'll ruin my own future. She flinched like I slapped her. It wasn't my intention. It was just true. This was the part one didn't fully grasp until Marianne laid it out like a flowchart. Because in the eyes of the state, I wasn't just the guy who raised him. I was the legal father on paper. Which meant my name wasn't just on a certificate. It was on obligations. I sat in Marianne's office while she explained options, risks, and timelines. She didn't promise outcomes, good lawyers don't. You're alleging fraud, she said. You'll need to show you didn't know, you relied on her representation, and you acted quickly once you discovered the truth. I nodded. Okay. Be prepared, she added, for emotional pressure. People will say, but he needs stability. And they're not wrong. The court prioritizes the child. Not fairness. That sentence hit me harder than any insult could have. Because I did care about Caleb's stability. But I also mattered. And Megan had made a decision that used my entire life as a buffer between her actions and consequences. We filed. No screaming. No threats. Just forms, affidavits, and certified mail. In our state, you can't just snap your fingers and be divorced. There are requirements. Timelines. Procedures. So Marianne did what she could do immediately: formal separation documentation, temporary financial arrangements, boundaries on communication, and a plan for what would happen in the home when Megan was served. She reacted exactly how Marianne predicted. Not with remorse. With outrage. She slammed the packet down on the kitchen counter and hissed, "So this is it? You're just going to erase us?" I looked at her and said, "You erased us. I'm correcting the record." She cried. She begged. She cycled through love, anger, guilt, self-pity like she was spinning a combination lock. I was scared, she sobbed. I didn't know how to tell you. You had 2 years, I said. You had every day I held him and thought I was his father. Her voice went sharp. So what, you're going to punish him to punish me? That's the move. The moral trap. Make you feel like a monster for demanding honesty. I didn't take the bait. I said, this isn't punishment. This is consequences. She stared at me like she couldn't comprehend a world where her tears didn't rewrite reality. I never hunted Dylan down in a parking lot. I didn't throw punches. I didn't need catharsis. I needed proof. Because if I was going to correct documents, the next logical step was to establish who the biological father actually was, especially if the court asked. Megan swore she'd handle it. She said she'd tell him. She said she'd ask him to step up. A week passed. Then 2. Nothing. Finally, Marianne arranged what she called a formal request. It wasn't a dramatic TV moment. It was paperwork that compelled cooperation. And Dylan, predictably, tried to disappear behind bravado. The first time I saw him again was in a conference room at a mediation office, not a bar. He walked in wearing a crisp button-down and that same confident expression I remembered from the holiday party, until he saw me. Then his face did something small. A flicker. Recognition with shame underneath it. Megan was already there, eyes down, hands clenched. Dylan sat, cleared his throat, and said, "Look, man, Marianne held up a hand. This is not a conversation. This is a legal matter. You've been identified as a potential biological father. We're here to discuss compliance." Dylan looked stunned that his charm didn't work on her. He turned to me like I was supposed to be the one he negotiated with. "Nate, I didn't know, she told me you guys were basically done." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "I don't care what she told you." He blinked. "What?" "I don't care about your story," I repeated. "I care about the facts." Megan made a small choking sound. Dylan's jaw tightened. "You're acting like I'm the bad guy." I didn't raise my voice. "You slept with a married woman," I said. "And now there's a child involved. If you want to debate morality, find a priest. Today is about responsibility. It was the first time I'd seen Dylan lose control of his expression. He looked at Megan. "You told him?" Megan whispered, "I didn't have a choice." Dylan scoffed. "There's always a choice." That was almost funny, coming from him. The paternity test for Dylan happened later, through the same lab process. And when it came back, 99%, the room felt like it lost oxygen. Megan started crying again. Dylan went pale and stared at the paperwork like it was written in a language he hated. He muttered, "This is insane." Marianne said, "It's biology." "It's not insane." Dylan glanced at me, searching for anger, for a fight, for something he could frame as two men being irrational. I gave him nothing. I just nodded once, like I was checking off an item on a list. People always want to simplify this part. They want me to say, "I walked away, easy." Or they want me to say, "I stayed anyway, because love." The truth is uglier and more human. I sat in my car outside daycare one afternoon and realized I couldn't keep living in a halfway state where I was dad in practice but disposable in law, where Megan could pull the rug whenever it suited her, where I'd be financially and legally tied to a lie forever. I also realized something that hurt so bad I felt sick. If Dylan was the biological father, then Caleb deserved to know that someday. Not as a weapon. Not as revenge. As truth. Because everyone deserves truth. Even when it wrecks you. So I made a decision that felt like swallowing glass. I pursued disestablishing my legal paternity. And to protect Caleb emotionally while doing it, I did something I didn't expect. I started seeing a therapist. Not because I wanted to heal in a pretty way. Because I needed help surviving the part where my heart and my boundaries were pulling me in opposite directions. My therapist, an older guy named Dr. Kenner, listened quietly while I talked about Caleb crawling into my bed at night. He didn't judge. He just said, "You're grieving two losses at once. Your marriage and your identity as a father. People underestimate the second one." I stared at the carpet and said, "How do you say goodbye to a kid who thinks you're permanent?" He didn't answer with a slogan. He said, "Carefully. And honestly, when he's old enough. But right now, you make decisions that prevent further harm." That's what I tried to do. The day I moved out, because by then the house felt like a haunted museum, I didn't make it dramatic. I rented a small apartment 20 minutes away. 2 bedrooms because I couldn't bring myself to get a 1-bedroom, like I was erasing the possibility of fatherhood completely. I packed while Megan was at work. When she came home and saw boxes gone, she sank onto the stairs like her legs gave out. "You're leaving," she whispered. "Yes." She looked up at me with raw panic. "What about Caleb?" I swallowed. "I'm not doing this in front of him." She grabbed my wrist. "Nate, please. You're the only dad he knows." I gently removed her hand. "And you should have thought about that before you let me believe a lie for 2 years." Her face twisted. "I didn't mean, I know what you meant," I said. "You meant to keep me." Then I walked out. No slamming doors. Just the quiet sound of a life changing. That night, I sat on the floor of my empty apartment and wrote a letter. Not to Megan. To Caleb. I wrote it in plain language. I wrote it like he might read it when he's 18 and angry and confused. I told him I loved him. I told him none of it was his fault. I told him I was sorry the adults in his life made choices that created pain. I sealed it in an envelope and put it in a folder labeled Caleb, for later. That folder sat in my closet for a long time. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No gasps. No courtroom speeches. Just a judge, a docket, and tired people waiting their turn to have their lives reduced to summaries. Megan wore a conservative dress and cried at the right moments. Dylan wore a suit like he was attending a work conference and looked furious at everyone, as if the existence of consequences insulted him. I wore the same button-down I wear to work, because I wanted to look like what I was, stable, sane, not vindictive. Mary Ann spoke. Megan's attorney spoke. Dylan's attorney spoke. My name got said a lot in sentences that felt like knives: presumed father, equitable considerations, best interest of the child, fraud allegation. At one point, the judge asked Megan directly, "Did you have reason to believe Mr. ______ was not the biological father at the time of birth?" Megan's lips trembled. She glanced at me like she wanted me to rescue her from the truth. I didn't move. She whispered, "Yes." The judge nodded like he'd heard it 1,000 times. Then he asked, "Did you disclose that uncertainty to him?" Megan cried, "No." And just like that, the lie became official. Not in the sense of absolving pain, but in the sense of being acknowledged as what it was. The judge ordered further steps. More paperwork. A timeline. He didn't wave a magic wand. But something shifted that day. Megan could no longer pretend this was a misunderstanding. It was documented betrayal. Dylan was established as the biological father. And I was no longer trapped in Megan's story. When we walked out of the courthouse, Megan caught up to me in the hallway. "Nate," she said, voice breaking. "Please. Just talk to me." I kept walking. She hurried beside me. "How can you be so calm?" I stopped and looked at her. "I'm not calm," I said quietly. "I'm controlled." "There's a difference." Her face crumpled. "So that's it? You're just done?" I stared at her for a moment, and I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel hate. I felt pity. Not the soft kind. The kind you feel when you watch someone step off a cliff holding their own hand. "I'm done letting you rewrite reality," I said. Then I turned and walked out. Megan assumed Dylan would step up in the romantic sense. That he'd suddenly become her partner, her safety net, her replacement husband. That's what she'd built in her head, I think. A story where she made a mistake but still ended up okay because someone would catch her. Dylan didn't catch her. Dylan did the bare minimum required and resented every second of it. He paid support because he had to. He didn't move in. He didn't propose. He didn't become the picture-perfect dad. And Megan, who had spent years managing the image of our life, couldn't manage the image of being a single mom whose affair partner wanted distance. She tried to lean on friends, but friends don't like being pulled into fallout they didn't consent to. She tried to lean on her family, but her mother, who loved me, genuinely, went cold when she learned the truth. I know that because her mom texted me once, "Nate, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I don't have words." I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Because I'd learned the hard way that responding keeps doors open you should close. Megan also tried, at one point, to villainize me. She told people I abandoned Caleb. But here's the problem with trying to frame someone as a monster when they've been quiet and steady: your own history betrays you. People remembered who took Caleb to daycare. Who showed up at birthday parties. Who carried diaper bags and wiped hands and did bedtime routines. And they also remembered how Megan had been, elsewhere. The story she tried to sell didn't stick. Because she didn't have facts. She only had emotion. And emotion is persuasive until it meets paperwork. When the timeline requirements were met and the divorce could be finalized, there wasn't a dramatic signing scene. There was a conference room, a stack of documents, and a sense of exhaustion so heavy it felt physical. Megan looked smaller than I remembered her from our early years. Like life had taken her confidence and wrung it out. She kept trying to catch my eye. Like if she could just make me look at her, she could pull me back into the old script. At one point, she whispered, "Do you ever miss us?" I didn't answer immediately. Because I did miss something. I missed the idea. The version of her I thought I married. The life I thought we had. But I didn't miss the reality. So I said, I miss who I thought you were. She flinched like that hurt more than anger. Can you ever forgive me? She asked, tears ready again. I looked at her and said, forgiveness isn't the same as access. That was the end of the conversation. We signed. We separated what was left. We walked out different doors. And that was it. 7 years reduced to ink. For a while after, my life felt like living in a house after a fire. The structure was there, technically. But everything smelled like smoke. I worked. I went to therapy. I exercised. I slept badly and then better. I learned how to cook for one without making food that tasted like depression. I stopped checking Megan's social media. I stopped asking mutual friends how she was doing. Not because I didn't care at all. But because caring was a hook. And I didn't want hooks in me anymore. Then, slowly, life started to grow around the wound. I met Lauren at a volunteer event, Habitat for Humanity, of all things, because my therapist suggested doing something physical with other people. Something that didn't revolve around my story. Lauren was a nurse. Straightforward. Kind in a way that wasn't performative. She had laugh lines and strong hands and a calm presence that made the air around her feel steadier. We talked over boxed sandwiches in the shade of a half-framed wall. She asked what I did. I asked what she did. She asked if I had kids. I paused. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to lie or dump the whole trauma on a stranger. I said, I used to think I did. Her face softened. That's a heavy sentence. Yeah, I said. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She just nodded like she understood that some pain isn't entertainment. We took it slow. Because I didn't trust myself. And I didn't trust love. But Lauren didn't try to convince me with intensity. She built trust the only way it can actually be built, consistency. Over time. A year later, standing in a small kitchen with her arms around my waist while we cooked dinner, I realized something that made my throat tighten. I wasn't bracing for impact anymore. I wasn't waiting for the next lie. That's when I knew I was actually healing. Eventually, we got married, small ceremony, close friends, no performance. And later, when Lauren told me she was pregnant, I didn't celebrate right away. My body didn't let me. My body remembered how joy can be weaponized. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the test in her hand like it might suddenly rewrite my life again. Lauren sat beside me and said, "Hey. I'm here. I'm real. This is real." I looked at her. "I'm scared." "I know," she said. "But you don't have to be scared alone." When our daughter was born, I held her and cried in a way I didn't know I still could. Not because biology was the only thing that mattered. But because truth and love were finally in the same place. A real family isn't about DNA. A real family is about not being built on lies. I don't stalk Megan's life. I don't relish her pain. But reality has a way of traveling through small towns and mutual circles. I heard that Dylan eventually moved on, new girlfriend, new apartment, pretending like his life hadn't cracked someone else's open. I heard Megan struggled financially for a while. Not destitute, but humbled. The kind of humbled you can't filter. I heard she lost friends. Lost respect. Lost the ability to narrate her life as, just a mistake, because too many people knew it was a sustained deception. Once, about 2 years after everything, she emailed me. Not about logistics. Not about legal stuff. Just a message. "Nate, I hope you're well. I'm sorry for everything. I know sorry doesn't fix it. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what I did. I hope you found peace. I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived it. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted her to suffer. Because I didn't owe her closure. She had taken enough. If you're reading this and your gut is screaming that something is wrong, here's what I'd tell you, not as a hero, not as some alpha male, just as a man who lived through the kind of betrayal that rewires you. Feelings are important, but facts keep you alive. Cry later. Document now. Do not confront without a plan. Not because you're playing games, because once the truth is out, people panic. Protect the child emotionally even when you're protecting yourself legally. Kids don't deserve the weight of adult sins. Cold doesn't mean cruel. Cold can mean controlled. Controlled can mean you still have a future. You can survive what feels unsurvivable. Not because you're special. Because humans are built to adapt, even to heartbreak. The hardest part of my story isn't the paperwork or the betrayal. It's the quiet moments that still show up sometimes, like when I see a toddler in a grocery cart and my brain flashes Caleb's face for half a second before I can stop it. I don't hate Megan. I don't love her. I'm just free of her. And freedom, I learned, is not a loud celebration. It's waking up in a life that's honest. It's coming home to someone who doesn't need secrets to stay. It's holding your child, your real child, your true life, and knowing the ground beneath you isn't built on a lie. That's the revenge, if you can call it that. Not destruction. Construction. A new life. A real family. And leaving the person who lied alone with the reality she tried to bury.